Hey, it's Jeremy from jeremy.net. I am a self-publishing comic book artist and writer. I share my creative process creating comics and artwork here for you guys on YouTube. If you would like to support this channel, my videos, and the comic books and artwork that I create, you can go and subscribe to my Patreon at patreon.com/Jeremy. There you will get bonus videos, bonus blog posts, and additional content. If you'd like to check out some of my comics, read them for free online, you can download PDF previews at comics.jeremy.net. And if you would like to buy some of my comic books, you can go to my Amazon page at amazon.jeremy.net. So, today on the board you can see we've got a bunch of figure drawings. I haven't done this in a while. I go back and I redraw or draw over my existing figure drawings from. I take figure drawing classes once a week. And for every good drawing I do, there's usually 20 or 30 that are bad. And the only way to really learn from your mistakes is to study them. So I go over my old figure drawings, and the ones that just didn't quite capture the essence of what the model was doing, or the anatomy's a little wonky, or the whole drawing is just a plain old train wreck. And I'll go in and I sort of redraw over them, study them, shift things around. Sometimes pull out some anatomy books to actually look at some reference and figure out why I'm drawing the thing wrong or what it is that I don't understand about it. See, we've already got a couple people in the chat. I see Amaris there. How you doing, Amaris? Thanks for joining me. And okay, it's funny. I like to say that figure drawing is not a skill to be learned, but it's a muscle to be exercised. The more you do it, the stronger you get. The less you do it, the weaker you get. But my wife and I have had the Game of Thrones marathons on TV all week because it's leading up to the season premiere tonight. And in watching Game of Thrones, it made me think of a metaphor that feels a little bit more apt to the way artists are using artwork as a tool, in the sense that figure drawing is like a sword that must constantly be sharpened. If you let it get dull, it'll still cut, but it won't be nearly as effective. So you constantly have to sharpen a blade. It's a tool that must always be refined. So, with that said, let's dive in. So these are probably some 5-minute poses. And the 5-minute poses in general, they're usually not particularly too complete. Oh, I see Didi has shown up in the chat. Hey, nice to have you on. Thanks for making it. Yeah, I'm going over some figure drawing work here. Let me bring the camera down a little bit. A, so you guys can get a closer view, and B, so I can keep an eye on the chat as I'm working. All right. Didi says, love your sketches. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And what we're going to do with these sketches is I'm going to work on refining them, not necessarily to make a pretty drawing, but just looking at what are some of the flaws that I currently have in my artwork, in some of my sketches, and saying, all right, I didn't quite get this gesture, I don't understand this anatomical concept. How can I make these drawings a little bit better? So, trying to think which one I want to start with. And I've got a couple of extra pieces underneath here. Again, these are drawings that I also have to, for the same purpose, to draw over and make corrections. But it's always good to have a little bit of extra paper, a few extra sheets underneath, actually probably like 10 or 20 sheets if I'm being honest, to give you a little bit of a cushion. Because when you're just drawing right on the hard surface of a table, and even my table has a piece of poster board attached to it, so it's a little bit softer than just drawing on the hard surface. But the more softening you can have, the better. And I think this particular drawing stood out as something I wanted, this one down here in the bottom left corner, as one I wanted to work on, because it was a great pose that the model had. One knee coming forward, foreshortened, the other knee also coming forward but pointing upward and then downward, and the fact that the knee is sort of bent in towards the torso as opposed to away. So there's a lot of interesting dynamics coming here, and there's enough of the sketch that I can understand what I was going for, but it still doesn't feel like I really got the foreshortening down. And foreshortening is one of those tricky areas. Also the fact that the torso is leaning back and turning and still leaning back. And I want it to work. This drawing may end up looking like a bunch of diagrams by the time I'm done, but that's because I think what I'm interested in for this is understanding better what the basic volumes are doing. And when I say basic volumes, I mean like you've got this leg coming forward, and the way I've drawn it, it seems like it's coming out as opposed to foreshortened. But in reality, if I do a little diagram next to it, I just lightly draw in the circles that will make up the upper part of the leg. And the lower part. What I'm trying to get that I don't think I really captured in the drawing there is that it's almost as if the leg is just shy of a 3/4. Like it's definitely sticking outward and it's going out pretty far. And this is one of those where I'm going to have to make a decision. I have to actually decide, do I want to keep this look of the leg going across and getting the length of it? Or do I want to enhance this foreshortening? And that's tough because the length of the leg coming across is what gives this thing a very nice silhouette. And it might be that the model intentionally turned this leg, like if it were coming directly at us, considering the fact the way her torso is coming down, directly at us would probably have been the most comfortable for her. But we have really good models, really experienced professional figure drawing models, and they will intentionally do things that they know create a strong dynamic to the pose. And she might have angled her leg so it twisted across, which might not necessarily be comfortable, but would give a stark contrast to this other leg coming forward and in. So I guess the first thing I want to do is try and figure out what's going on with the two different legs in terms of, it's not just figuring out what it should be anatomically, but it's also figuring out what do I want it to say. Because there's nothing wrong with tweaking. In fact, you should tweak what the model is doing so that it looks better on the page. But it's one thing to make stuff up simply because you're all, well, this is my style and that's how it should look, as opposed to saying, this makes the drawing more dynamic. Or it takes something that, if you look at it in real life on the page, it's not as clear and descriptive, and saying, no, I actually want to clarify this, or I want to change the pose so that it'll read, because if I drew what was exactly there, it might come out a little bit hard to understand. Just making decisions for the sake of clarification as opposed to stylization. And when I say these things, these are things that I still struggle with. All right, let me just get in here with the actual leg. To be honest, this is one that I've been trying to do the drawings, instead of doing it on a separate sheet, I've been trying to draw directly on the actual original sketch I did. This pose almost feels like it might need more space. Like it probably should be bigger, a bigger drawing in order for me to get in here and fix the things I want to fix. But let's start with just working out the hips a little bit. Dee Dee says, you're an artist that definitely puts in the work. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Yeah, well, I think that it's true of a lot of artists. Like most of the people that you admire, from what I have learned in terms of studying, we're all like a swan floating on a lake, and it looks really graceful and gliding along, but you don't see underneath the water the legs furiously paddling and putting in all of the work. And for me, I feel like showing this work is maybe a way to encourage other artists who feel like, oh, my work isn't good enough, I'm never going to be able to do the things that I want to do. And certainly don't feel like my art is where I want it to be yet. I still feel like I have much more growing and learning to do. But by sharing that growing and learning process and saying, look, you don't just come out and artwork is beautiful and brilliant. Sometimes you have to draw a piece over and over and over again in order to get it to look as good as you want. And maybe by showing that encouragement, it makes you realize, oh, it's not necessarily that I am a bad artist. This piece isn't done yet. It needs more work. It needs me to look up more reference. It needs me to maybe, well, not necessarily because these are figure drawing studies, but maybe if it's a standalone illustration, maybe I need to go shoot my own photo reference or pose or get a friend to pose. There's a whole lot of things that may be the reason why a piece is not where you want it to be. And very little of it has to do with you are a good or bad artist. And most of it is really, there's work to be done. And I think showing that work and encouraging other people to put in the same kind of work in theirs is great for all of us as artists. I mean, even someone who might necessarily not be that good of an artist, if they work very, very hard, they can produce a piece that people say, okay, I can see this is a good piece of artwork. You put in some work. I think the hard work is way more of an indicator, or rather, hard work is what will determine whether the piece comes out good or bad. I don't think talent is kind of like a surface. You've got like a nice, talent is really just at the base level. Some people might have a certain little bit of an affinity or an advantage, like they might naturally see anatomy a little bit better, or they might have a better sense of composition. But talent will only get you so far. And most of the work really has to come from work. There's no way around that. But the good news is that you don't need to worry about how talented you are or are not. It means, in a way, the work is what levels the playing field. So far I've just been erasing other lines that were in this figure. But what I'm really trying to do here is create, I need a little bit more tone with this. Gotta get this so I can get a nice soft tone. What I'm trying to do, I'm just sort of gridding these in here with rings as though she was wearing striped stockings. And I think what really kills it is this foot at the end, because this foot really doesn't feel like it's going. First off, the foot is ill-defined. But if I do define it, I need to define it where you can really see the bottom of the foot. Because seeing the side of the foot is what kills this pose and makes it feel like it isn't quite properly in proportion. Whereas if you can really see the bottom of this foot, then you get the sense of, oh, you're looking up a leg that even though it's kind of to the side, you're still looking up at it, and you get that sense that continues up into the torso. So this is what I meant when I said that this was going to end up looking a lot more like a diagram, because that's what I'm trying to break down, is how to get this sense of foreshortened, yet you're still seeing more of a long side of the pose. You're seeing it, it's coming at you, but you're still seeing a length of it as opposed to seeing very strong foreshortening. And it's a very, very subtle thing. Let's see if I can adjust my camera a little bit, because I think I keep banging the table and making it shake a little, which might not be fun for you guys. It's not like I'm trying to do the Blair Witch drawings. Shaky cam. All right, let me adjust this a tiny bit. All right. Let us continue. So yeah, and I think the first thing, this is interesting. So I drew the knee up here, but this foot is turned to the side. This is where anatomical questions get interesting. Let me grab my trusty skeleton here, Mr. Bones. All right. I don't know how well I'm going to be able to show this because this is a pretty big skeleton. He's like 3 feet tall. But what I want to show you... Whoop. Damn it. Broke my pencil. Probably broke it for good. I just dropped it twice. All right. Fortunately, when I'm figure drawing, I usually have 3 sharpened by the side, ready to go. All right. So, wow. All right. I'm gonna have to raise the camera way up to show you this. Okay. So, this leg's sitting here. Let's lay Mr. Bones on the table. So what I wanted to show you with this is the foot. Now, I mentioned seeing the underside of the foot. This thing doesn't twist the way that an actual human hip twists, but it is possible to turn your foot so that the knee can be turned, like the hip can be straight, but the knee can still be turned in a little bit. And I think that the fact that I put the knee facing straight up is going to be detrimental to that foot, because it looks like what's happening is that the model has the knee turned across and also turned out. So you're seeing the bottom of the foot at a hard angle like this, like you're seeing the bottom turned instead of straight up. Because if the knee is up like this, generally the knee and the foot are pointing in the same direction. But as you can see in the sketch I've got there, the knee is turned off to the side. Well, the foot is turned off to the side. So if the foot is turned off, the knee is probably turning away, which means we're actually seeing more of the broad and slightly underside of the hip, just slightly underside. So I need to make some adjustments to there. These are the kind of things, this is one of the reasons why I say going to a figure drawing class is so important. You do these studies, and then you come back and you look at your anatomy books and you say, well, why is it not matching what I sketched down there? And part of it is having reference tools like these. Sometimes it's just a matter of being aware. If you don't necessarily have a bunch of anatomy books, it might be that the next time you go to a figure drawing class, you might see a model take a similar pose, and you can look for, well, which way is the knee facing? Because, you know, knowing which way the knee is facing is going to determine which way the foot's facing. But by the same token, if I drew the foot facing off to the side, that says something about which way the knee is facing. There's a relationship between the two, and you can use that relationship to fix anatomical drawings. Or fix anatomical problems, rather. All right. I'm just going to leave Mr. Bones on the floor here because we might need him again. All right. Let's get back down here. Take a little water. I see American Swordfish just popped into the chat. How you doing, man? Good to see you. Just doing some figure drawing here. Or rather, studying my figure drawing work from class and making some corrections. So, something that I like to do, and I actually got this from a figure drawing book called The Anatomy for the Artist. In fact, let me grab it real quick. Where is that book? I have many bookshelves around the house, but I keep the bookshelf specifically for figure drawings right behind my drawing table for all of my anatomy reference. But there's a great tool that I picked up from this book, and I think she calls it Drawing Transparent Bodies. That might be what it's called. Drawing the pelvis, drawing the head. Yeah, here we go. So there's a section of this book called Transparent Bodies. See a couple more in the chat. 3MCL, how you doing? Good to see you. Ion Rocks is in the chat as always. Good to see you, man. So in this book, the book is called Anatomy for the Artist by Sarah Simblett, photography by John Davis. Very important because the photography is beautiful in this book. The reason why I love this book is because it has both figure drawings, but it also has, it's very photography based, showing you the relationship between, well, this is what we put down in this diagrams and anatomy book, and this is the different ways that the muscles can look in real life. So the reason why I want to show you this transparent body section is because that's what I'm about to do, at least to a small degree. We have a section in here where the artist does some drawings where you can see the muscles, you can see the outer anatomy, but then draws the spine, the rib cage, the shoulder blades into the drawing. And the idea here is drawing a figure, but doing parts where you can see the actual like muscles inside of that person's body. It helps you relate the inner anatomy to the outer anatomy. And in fact, there's a drawing that I keep pegged above my artboard. And this was a pose that I was working on trying to understand the knees and the thighs. And just the fact of going in and really drawing the bones helped me much clearly understand what was going on with the muscles on top. All right, so with this knee here, let's erase a little bit of the detail that I put in there, because this is going to end up being the underside of the knee. So let's say that your hip, which would be the upper head of the femur, let's say that I just slightly indicate that. And then let's say that the femur is coming towards us, but let's say that we're turning it a little bit. If I were to draw it like a box, we'd be seeing the underside. Here's sort of the ball of the femur, but it's almost like we're looking at the femur in profile, in a foreshortened profile. Really, yeah, still kind of close to a 3/4, because we're looking up at it. But the reason for this diagram is because I wanted to realize that as opposed to having the knee facing directly up towards where the figure's up is, maybe the knee is facing just turned a little bit away to that side. As we follow down the tibia, and then the fibula becoming the ankle, we can have that turned also in kind of a similar manner. Now let's just say, before I go in and actually try to draw the shape of the foot, because feet are difficult. In fact, my figure drawing instructor, Carl Ganas, he teaches a class specifically on heads, hands, and feet, because those are basically 3 of the most challenging things to draw. And if you can draw those well, people will forgive a lot and everything else. But before I get into actually drawing the feet, I'm just going to block in just a basic rectangle. And this basic rectangle represents the underside of the foot. And you can kind of see the top of the foot coming down towards that plane. So let's just say there's a side plane here. The foot actually makes a rounding, kind of a curving turn. The ankle goes in a little bit and then comes back out. But for the sake of doing a little bit of drawing here, let's just have it sort of round off. Then it comes back. The big toe would be sticking out. It would come in dramatically where the arch of the foot is. But the main thing I wanted to get was that sense of the underside, of this being a plane that's facing you. Because that, I think, helps sell this whole overall feel of foreshortening. Truth be told, if this is the angle the body is at, I kind of want to pull, you know what? Screw it, let's do it. I don't want to be afraid to, the whole point of doing this is studying. So you can't necessarily be afraid to wreck a drawing or make a bold change or dynamic decision. If this foot is foreshortened like it is, if this whole leg is foreshortened the way it is, this foot is sticking out too far. To be honest, this foot, I had it out here, and realistically it should probably, if it's foreshortened the way I'm trying to describe it, it should probably be in a little bit more, maybe here. So let's move the ankle up. Let me put in that bounding box again. So bounding box. Damn it, broke another one. We're down to one pencil, so if this one breaks, you're gonna have to watch me sharpen pencils, which I don't think is particularly interesting. It is important, actually. Again, my instructor, Carl Gnass, he has a video on his YouTube channel. If you go to, I think it's Carl with a K and then Gnass, Gnass Studios. I think that's his YouTube channel. If you go there, he has a video specifically where he shows how to sharpen, how a pencil should be sharpened for figure drawing. And you'd be like, well, when you just use a normal pencil sharpener and sharpen it? And the answer is no. The reason why is because the shape of the pencil, the way that you expose the amount of lead you have, and the point that you give will allow you to lay down a pencil and give a broad, soft tone, as well as being able to do lines, and that you can transform from tone to line and back. And that's a very important tool for describing volume, because all a tone is a soft edge. You know, and all a line is a very hard tone, but what it is it's describing light and how light turns away from you. And describing how light turns away from an object is the essence of defining forms and volumes. I hope that doesn't sound too highfalutin or too technical. I mean, it's one of those things where once you get used to figure drawing and you realize you're just trying to describe the same way that you would just do a simple diagram of a sphere, and the way that you shade it describes light moving away from, or light hitting the direct part and coming back to you, and then less and less light, light hitting it, moving off to the side as opposed to into your eye, just helps define the shape of that object. What's true for a sphere becomes true for a shoulder, a head, a kneecap, the bottom of a foot. So in all things, the way that light is described, or rather a form turning away from the light, that is what describes everything. That describes all shapes and all forms when it comes to figure drawing. So it's all about that inner balance of line and tone. I see a question in the chat. Now, Oh, 3MCL asks, I have a question. Is it realistic for one person to do all of the processes of creating a comic book, writing story, script, drawing, flatting, and coloring, and wouldn't that take forever? Ha 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 ha. The answer is yes, it is realistic, and the answer is yes, it takes forever. Hang on, let me step away from my desk for a second. So, this is an issue of my comic Morningstar. It's not the most recent issue, but I realize my most recent issues are buried in a box because I haven't unpacked from my recent convention at WonderCon. But I'm the writer, the artist, the self-publisher. My comics are 24 pages. They're black and white, but they do have gray tones. So I go in and, I letter the books, I write them, I do the pencils and inks, although my pencils are rough layouts. And if you look through my videos, you can see the entire process for each issue and how long it takes me. And the sad truth is, it usually takes me about, I want to say 8 months to finish each issue. So yeah, it's a very, very long time. My goal has always been to get up to the speed of being able to publish quarterly, so being 3 months an issue. And the closest I've ever gotten was putting out 2 issues in 1 year. Part of it is also the fact that I have a bad habit of taking on too many projects and have too many things going on at once. I think if I really did focus, I could get up to at least 2 issues per year consistently, which is still better than nothing for doing it all by yourself. But yeah, I am now up to, it's an 8 issue series that I'm working on. And I just published issue 7, so I'm working on the final issue. I started this back in 2012, so it's a very long process. But here's the thing. If I were going to have a colorist, I would have to pay that colorist. I don't expect another artist to work on my book for free, but I don't have the budget to pay a colorist, so I work with the tools that I have. In an ideal world, you could possibly find a team of collaborators that want to work on the project, and whether you're working with other writers, whether you're writing it and you're working with other artists or inkers, letterers, whoever, in a perfect world, you could possibly do something where you're paying them a small amount up front and then giving them royalties on the project so that maybe you could afford to have a creative team. Excuse me. But yeah, what it comes down to is if you can afford to hire other people to work on your project, and even if they have a part of creative ownership, they should have some sort of financial compensation on top of that. But even if you can, if you can afford it, then yeah, you should, because you'll be able to get your work done faster. For me, I don't have the budget to do it. I do all of the work myself, but also I really enjoy all of these processes. And for a long time, the part I enjoyed the least was doing the gray tones, mainly because I didn't feel like I was very good at it. But in the most recent issue, I kind of found my flow with doing gray tones. It's become a little bit more efficient. So even that I'm enjoying more. So if you can afford to have other people, it's great. But if you don't, then what are your choices? To just either not do your comic or do it very slowly. So do it slowly, and hopefully you'll be able to make sales from it and eventually hire someone on. I have considered hiring a colorist, or I have considered hiring somebody to do gray tones for my book, but I'm so close to the end of this series that I'm figuring I might as well just finish off myself. But for my next series, I'm definitely considering it. So yeah, but the point is you don't go to war with the army you wish you had. You go to war with the army you do have. And if right now all you have is yourself, then do it. If you have a bunch of friends who all have different creative skills and would love to collaborate on a comic book together, and also if it's not a long series, if you're just doing a one-shot or a 48-page story or just a short graphic novel, then hey, maybe you can convince some friends to come and do it all together, and you're all going to share in the profits. That's a reasonable way to go. But until you have the financial options or the friends, the collaborators that are the infrastructure of collaborators that want to work on a project, regardless of where they're getting money up front. If you don't have either of those two things, you just have to do it yourself. So that's the answer. The answer is you're right about all of it. It does take forever. I've been taking forever. It's slower than I would like, but that's what I have to work with. So I see a few more questions, and then I also see some other comments in the chat. So let's work through those. Lameworks asks, I have a question. I'm about to finish up a college course that has nothing to do with art. I've decided to take a year working part-time on to focus on art. Do you feel fine art school has much to offer someone looking to build the fundamental drawing skills to go into comics and storyboard? I honestly don't. I went to a fine art school. I went to UCLA, and I learned a lot from that program. But the things that I learned were more about critical thinking, about being able to analyze your work, why you're creating it, what you're trying to say about it, because it's a school of critical theory. The artists that they produce, if they do go into the art world, they're going into the fine art gallery scene. And in the gallery scene, it isn't necessarily about the surface aesthetics. In terms of, if you're doing figure drawing work, it doesn't necessarily have to look like classical Renaissance figure drawing. I mean, to be honest, if you can justify why it's in the style it looks like, it really doesn't matter if you draw the whole thing with your feet. That's not to say that art that comes out of fine art gallery programs isn't well drawn. It's that academic draftsmanship is not the point. The point is having a strong creative concept and being that the work describes and backs up that concept. So it's not about these surface aesthetics per se. And coming out of that program, I learned a lot about how to obviously talk about art, because I'm talking to you guys about it. And I learned a lot about how to think about my ideas and make sure that I'm really, if I'm going to do a project, it's going to be something that says what I want it to say. But it really didn't teach me much about draftsmanship, and I didn't start learning how to draw better. I think by the end of school, I came out a worse draftsman than I did when I went in, but I think I was more creative. The draftsmanship I started learning when I started taking classes, elective classes in the animation program. And animators have to understand how to move objects. When I say move them, they need to understand how to revolve an object in space, how to draw a hand turning or a body turning or anything. They need to understand volume and structure and anatomy, even if it's very cartoonily distorted. And when I started taking those classes, that's actually when I took an internship at Nickelodeon. I think I had my first class with my current figure drawing instructor way back then when he was giving workshops at Nickelodeon. So that studying animation put me on the road to actually learning draftsmanship. I would say that in terms of learning storyboarding and comic skills, that really comes from academic figure drawing. I'm trying to think. Online, there's a few different places that teach stuff. I think there's something called CDMA Academy. But if you look at Stan Prokopenko, his YouTube channel is exactly the type of figure drawing that you need to be studying. That's when I talk about academic figure drawing, I'm talking about what artists were studying during the Renaissance in terms of studying basic anatomy and volume and proportion and composition and figure dynamics. All of the figure drawing that's in comics and animation all comes out of like that. The study of that style of drawing, the source of it all goes back to the Renaissance. But if you look at Proko's channel, that's a lot of what he teaches online. In terms of studying near you, if you can find a place where they teach figure drawing classes where you're working from live models, that's great. In terms of animation storyboarding in itself is a very specialized skill, and you really kind of have to take a class on storyboarding to really get the hang of it. I don't know if there's a place near you where you can take just workshops, because you don't necessarily have to enter a 2-year program. You can take a course on it, because if you take one course that's really well taught on storyboarding, you can spend years studying what you learned in that class and trying to refine it and perfect it. Continually working to improve your stuff just from one class. Because storyboarding, much like figure drawing, you're always learning and growing because it's literally the essence of storytelling. Let's see. 3MCL says, so you're like Prince when it comes to artwork, then hashtag hard work. Yes, yes, very much so. And to be honest, I don't feel like I work hard enough. I wish I had more hours in the day to spend just studying drawing. What little time I do have is spent because I have a day job. I'm not doing comics and figure drawing and artwork full time. I usually only get maybe 1 or 2 hours a day to do personal work. So when I get that little sliver of time, I'm spending that time working on my comic book. I'm doing thumbnails, or I'm doing my layouts or lettering. I'm not spending time just sitting and doing studies like these, but that's one of the reasons why I wanted to include it as part of my YouTube channels, because this forces me to say earlier, at least for 1 hour a week outside of class, I'm working on figure drawing. Realistically, I should be doing my figure drawing classes once a week, and it's 3 hours. So realistically, I should still be doing an hour of figure drawing every day outside of class. I'm not. I'm usually spending that time working on comics, and I can kind of try to work. I can try when I'm doing my comics work to take the things I learned in class and work those into the comics. But it's not the same as drawing just for the sake of doing studies where I'm analyzing, particularly analyzing your own drawings that didn't come out well, is one of the best ways to learn how to draw better. But let's see here. Let's roll back up through the comments because there's a few here. You guys lit the chat up. So Dee Dee says, don't you feel more fulfillment when you've done the whole book yourself? Yes, I very much do. And to be honest, I would be happier if I had more time to do the whole book myself, as opposed to having the same amount of time I currently have, but having other people help me. I'm a little bit of a control freak, I can admit that. But being a control freak, I really do enjoy doing all aspects of the process, and I find that more satisfying. Now, in reality, there aren't more hours in the day, so what's more realistic is getting to the point where I can afford to hire people to help me with gray tones or other aspects. I can't really farm out the lettering because the way I tend to write, lettering has become part of my writing process. So gray tones really are the only thing I could farm out because also, again, with my pencils are really rough layouts, and most of the finishing of the drawing is done in the inking. So for me, inking also is kind of integral. I can't really farm that part out to someone else either, unless I was really willing to collaborate where I brought in somebody whose style, if somebody who was used to not just inking work, but used to finishing someone's pencils, and someone whose style I really felt I would be willing to let represent the work, because you would see more of their artwork in the finished page than mine because my layouts are so loose. So, yeah, but the point being, there aren't more hours in the day. It's more likely to hire other people on to help with a project as opposed to having the time to do it all myself. But if I had my choice, I'd spend more time and just continue to do all of it myself. That really does give me the most satisfaction. Okay. 3MCL. Is this just a clever way of saying Emil? That might be. But 3MCL says you can self-educate yourself, and you just have to have discipline and be consistent in learning by yourself. Creative jobs are also recession proof. Writers, artists during the Renaissance became wealthy during that period. Well, I don't know if any particular job is recession proof, but I think that as opposed to doing sales and marketing or being able to analyze spreadsheets, there's certain skills that I think a lot of people can learn. Whereas when it comes to making art, there's very few people that are willing to put in the amount of time that it takes to learn proper draftsmanship and skill. But that's because it's a skill that takes a lot of hard work, and the rewards are not necessarily upfront. A lot of times you have to be drawing for decades before you're doing the kind of work where people will say, this is amazing, I will pay you whatever you want because no one else can do what you do. It takes a very long time, and some people never reach that level of skill. It's possible that I may never reach that level of skill, but I do this work because it's what I genuinely enjoy. It is what I'm passionate about. And that passion for making art is what will carry you through those times when you're doing it and there aren't necessarily many rewards. So, yeah. I mean, I want to be well compensated for the work that I do, but I do this work because this is what makes me happy. This is what I actually want to spend my time doing. I mean, sometimes I have conversations with people where they're like, well, no one really likes their job and no one really likes what they do. And I think it's kind of sad that we live in a world where so many people have to spend their days doing things that they don't enjoy. I mean, there are a lot of people who really do enjoy, you know, a well designed spreadsheet and being able to provide and crunch data for people and being able to take complicated financial problems or financial situations and break them down so they can explain them to a layman, or that they can say, all right, you may not understand what I'm doing, but these are the results you want. These are the business decisions you should make based on that. The same way that I want to sit down and spend hours and hours just figuring out which way the femur should be pointing when the knee is pointed this way. These are the kind of things that I enjoy. They're difficult problems, but not everyone would want to do this problem. I mean, you look at doctors. Doctors have to understand anatomy much better than artists, but, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can draw. They understand it in a different way in terms of a functional way. And they do need to know, well, this is how a bone should be facing. Because if they're looking at an x-ray and they're like, well, this isn't right, they still have to understand these things, but they understand it in a different kind of functional way than artists do. See some more comments in the chat there. 3MCL. Oh, hey, Travis Frederick's in the chat. How you doing, Travis? Thanks for showing up. Good to see you. So 3MCL says, you have to love what you do or else you'll stress yourself into bad health. Well, you see, that's why so many Americans are unhealthy. I mean, you talk about the fact that we have a health crisis in the United States of Americans not having too much of a sedentary lifestyle. We're not taking care of our health, and we're spending our days doing things that we don't want to do, or that we're unhappy, and we're unhappy, so we stress eat, so we're carrying more weight than we should, we're not getting the amount of exercise that we should. All of these things kind of pile up, and it's sad because it's preventable, and I'd like to think that I can see the practicalities. I can see how someone might say, well, it's a pipe dream. Sometimes you just got to earn money and you got to do what people will pay you for. People right now are buying my comic books, but comics are not paying my rent. They're not paying our mortgage. They're not putting food on the table. I'm not losing money making my artwork. It's making back the money in terms of the time I spend doing it. But I'd like to keep working towards getting to that point where it really becomes a profitable thing, where it's not just, I'm providing both entertainment and joy for other people, and so I'm providing that service, and yet I'm also doing something that is fulfilling to me, and that I want my artwork to at some point be able to perform both of those functions in my life and in the world. But it's something that you have to keep working towards, and that's one of the reasons why I'm always trying to study and improve my craft, because the better the art I can create, the more people will want to interact with it and will want to support my work. I mean, the thing is, I am always grateful for you guys showing up and hang out with me while I'm figure drawing, while I'm studying, while I'm working on the comics. Excuse me. But the universe doesn't owe me an audience. Just because I make art, it doesn't mean people have to show up to look at it or appreciate it or give me positive or negative feedback or critiquing it. You can make artwork and then can just go out in space and nobody cares. It happens and it sucks. But you're not, just because you make art, you aren't guaranteed that people should pay attention to it. That's part of the reason for working so hard to become good at it, because it's through developing your craft and developing a quality and having something to say about that work. That's what earns you an audience. You have to earn it. With every drawing, with every book you do, you have to earn people's attention, because there's plenty of people who are like, you know what, screw it, I'm not interested in figure drawing. I'm going to go play Fortnite. Or they're going to go watch Umbrella Academy on Netflix. There's lots of other things people can be doing with their time. So artwork, creativity has to be worth that time, or people are going to go look at other artists that are producing work that's amazing and astounding. I mean, you look at someone like Kim Jong-il, people will just go and watch him draw for hours. And the only reason why I don't sit and watch all of his videos for hours is because I realize, oh, that's it. This isn't making me a better artist. I need to go do some work. I need to spend time working on my craft. But he is one of those artists who's so brilliant that you would gladly just sit and watch him, because watching him draw is like watching magic. It's like watching someone perform this amazing trick. You're like, how does somebody just pull these beautiful forms and figures and amazing compositions out of their head? So now this, I haven't been talking much about what I'm drawing. I'm trying to get back to this basic form here of the thigh. And I'm doing kind of a diagram here. And the challenge is that the thigh is coming in towards the body a little bit. It's coming in towards the body, but also towards the viewer. That's what's happening with the upper thigh, this thigh. And then it gets to the top with the knee, and the knee comes back out, still coming towards the body. And the challenge is getting that transition point, the knee. The knee is that transition. And I'll tell you, I've been meaning in figure drawing class, one of the things I'm constantly trying to remind myself to focus on and really pay attention to are joints. Because step one is being able to describe volume and form. Step two is being able to describe a change in direction. Being able to describe when a volume goes from this way to that way or that way. When an arm bends back on itself. How a muscle wraps around a joint. So, let's see here. Some more comments in the chat. Didi's like, yeah, Ion. We're all talking about how awesome Kim Jong-il is. And Rock says, that guy is crazy. Didi says, your positive attitude makes watching you enjoyable along with your awesome skills. Thank you so much. All I can say is thank you, because I feel like it's stuff that I'm working on, and I still, the whole point of me doing this is that there are figure drawings that I don't feel are 100% successful, but I enjoy telling you what I'm trying to do to make it better and improve. And I don't think it does anyone any good to beat themselves up and just say, oh, I suck. Instead, the fun is in rolling up your sleeves and saying, all right, how can I make this better? What don't I know? Because really, it's that learning process about anatomy and art that's going to make us better artists. And being enthusiastic about drawing is what's going to get you there. If you just have a negative attitude about learning how to do things better, you're never really going to... First off, it means you probably don't enjoy learning. But yeah, you're never really going to learn how to make things better if you have a negative attitude. Now, I see that I made a decision in here. I rounded this knee up higher, and I probably shouldn't have gone so dark with this line, than it really needs to be, because this knee, it should be coming towards the figure more. It shouldn't be coming that high. I like the dynamics and the fact that generally the closer something is to a silhouette, meaning looking at the side, when you look at something from the side, you can tell what the actions are a lot better than you can when it's coming directly towards you. Like, let me see here. Like, let's take this figure. This is one of the, I've mentioned how I ordered some that came, in one of my videos, somebody asked about these figures, and I said that I ordered one from wish.com. This elbow is backwards, and it's not one of those where I can turn it around into a certain orientation where it's forward. It's still always going to be kind of backwards. But because this the arm should be actually bending that way. So I can twist it. Whoops. Wow, her head just came off. Excuse me, I'm still recovering from a bit of a cold. All right, let's not get off on a tangent. So if you have an arm reaching out towards this, you can see, oh, she's reaching out. But if you have something where, let's say, the knees are foreshortened and the arm is like that. Now, first off, if you were drawing this hand, if you were doing just the silhouette, you wouldn't necessarily even be able to tell if this is a hand, because all you would see is just a blob and a little blob coming over it. You would still need to have the outer edges, the contours, the underside of the hand, and the fingers to kind of show where it's separating volume-wise. But it would be hard to understand what the action this person's taking just by the silhouette. And a strong silhouette helps forms read better, being able to see that. Now, to a certain degree, it does make sense to change a silhouette so that you can make it read better. But if I were to move this knee up, it means I would also have to move this thigh in and up. So realistically, I mean, not the thigh, the lower leg would need to be higher. Or not necessarily higher, it means that you wouldn't see this underside, because it means that instead of, if this is up, it means that this angle, instead of being up like that and down, it would be higher up and higher down. You wouldn't see this underside here because the leg would be covering it. It'd be coming down. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to bring this back down, and I'm going to end up erasing that upper line. I liked what it was doing figure-wise, and for a while, like for a moment, I was just drawing and I kind of got lost in, well, this shape looks better, and the shape does look better, but it doesn't describe what I'm trying to do, so I'm going to erase that. This is a lot of time spent on just one particular figure, and to be honest, most of it's been spent drawing the lower body, the legs. But you guys have been asking some good questions while we're doing it. And, you know, I have been thinking about continuing to do the live streams, but trying to work back in occasionally more videos where I'm just, doing a time lapse so that I'm drawing and then do the talking afterwards. Because I do realize that I draw much slower when I'm talking while I'm drawing. And you guys can probably learn a lot of what I'm trying to describe. If I were to just do this in a time lapse in 5 minutes and just clearly explain what it is I'm trying to do, I would get to what I consider a corrected drawing much faster. And you would just see in 5 minutes, oh, that's what he's trying to fix, instead of just kind of, because what you're doing is in real time, you're hearing me walk through all of the blind alleys and oh, I tried this, and oh, that's a mistake, and moving that around. Whereas if we were just watching a 5-minute time lapse of what I've done, you just hear me say, all right, I moved this around, I drew that, I figured out this. I mean, this does give you a sense of what the drawing process really is for me on the day-to-day, where it really is a lot of draw and erase, move stuff around, make a mistake. But I don't know. It seems like you guys might get more out of having the information boiled down by occasionally me still posting some of the older style videos where it's just me doing a time lapse and talking over it. I don't know. Let me know what you guys think. Let's see. Travis Frederick says, Jeremy, your artwork inspires young and up-and-coming artists. I'm honored to hear that. Thank you, man. Anything that helps other creatives, inspires them to produce work and grow and learn, they should go for it. I'm glad I can be a part of that. So I'm going to hit the last couple of comments here in the chat, let you know we're at 59 minutes. So I'll answer these questions, maybe draw a little bit of this forearm and tighten that up in the upper arm of the figure, and then we'll wrap it up. So we're probably going to wrap up here in about 5 minutes. If you guys have any other questions you want to get in, feel free to lay it out there. So 3MCL says that it's like listening to Richard Pryor describing all the various constructions of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Yes, there's a lot of complications to the figure, but if it were simple, it'd be easy for everyone to draw. And 3MCL says, is there such a thing as adult comic books? Yes, there are definitely adult comic books. There are books for mature readers. Let's say like Alan Moore's Watchmen or From Hell. Those books really aren't written for kids. They're kind of complicated, more detailed books. And there's lots of stuff. There's lots of comics that are geared towards adults as opposed to kids. And then there's also adult. I think like the whole Vertigo line from DC Comics is they can call it mature readers. So it's just comics that aren't necessarily superhero fare, that have more complex, complicated stories, and they're about more complicated subjects, or just subjects that adults are more into. Trying to think what else. Some good comic books for adults. The point being is that there's also adult comics in the sense of erotica, sexual content that's definitely not appropriate for kids. And there is a comic book publisher named Eros who produces a lot of books, and they're some of them are sort of like Cinemax, how they have what they would call Skinemax, where it's like thinly veiled plots with reasons for characters to end up naked and having sex. And then there's some books like there's a really good book by the Hernandez brothers, the creators of Love and Rockets. Actually, it might not be the Hernandez brothers. I think it might just be Gilbert Hernandez. But there's a book called Birdland, and it has all of the great emotional content of a Love and Rockets comic, where it's just about like it's almost like a soap opera where it's a whole complicated family and a brother and sister and friends and these people who this person's in love with that person, this one married to this other person, but they're having an affair with another one. You actually really care about their emotions and the story in terms of the soap opera aspect of will these people work out their relationship problems or not. But in between that, they're all having sex with each other. That book, I think, in terms of sexual comics, that one I think stands out because the writing is very, very good. And I think that it's a high bar for what mature reader comics can be. And again, going back to Alan Moore also has a book called Lost Girls, which is, I believe it's Alice in Wonderland. I can't remember the other two characters. I think it's like Alice in Wonderland, Wendy from Snow White, and one other character. But it's sort of like a story about their sexual awakening, and it's told as a fantasy story, but it's allegorical. And I own the book. I haven't read it yet because I just haven't had time. But that's another one where it's a book that deals with sex and sexuality. It's not a book for kids, but it's very well. I bought it because it's Alan Moore. He does great stories, and it's interesting. Like for me, if I just need to see adult material, there's places you can find adult material online. For me, if it's going to be a comic book or a graphic novel or something I'm going to take time to read, I would want the art and the story to be something that's beyond just being titillating. I want it to actually have a good story and actually have some interesting content. So there's books like that. I'm trying to go back. There's a ton of books that are comics for adults that are just, good stories. Again, like Watchmen or From Hell. I'm thinking of a lot of Alan Moore stuff because I'm currently reading Alan Moore's Prometheus. So I'm thinking of all of Alan Moore's books. In fact, that's a good thing. You can just look at Alan Moore's book. He does great comics for adults. That's a good starting point. Let's just say Alan Moore. Start from there, move outward. And Neil Gaiman. Let's see here. 3MCL also says, I'm enjoying this stream and your other videos. I found your channel last night. Well, you know what? There's tons of videos up there. The channel just recently passed 6,000 subscribers. So hopefully you'll subscribe and you'll see when I've got the new videos out. There's a lot of stuff there to check out. You can basically watch me as I'm drawing my comic book over several years. Dee says, both are useful. The time lapse for the succinct info, but the live shows for my thinking process. So it's good to know. I'll continue with the live streams, but I have some videos, some stored up time lapse videos that I haven't posted yet. Some of them I'm going to save for my Patreon, but I do need to post a few of those on this channel as well. Well, I still don't feel like this knee is doing exactly what I need it to. But what I really want is for it to just come up. Because I need it to feel both like the end, the cap that's on top of the lower leg, as well as the terminating end of the thigh. And right now, it's just a matter of getting these two to connect in a way that feels like it's in perspective and covers everything that I want. So it's still not perfect, but let me just put in a couple of gridded diagram lines here so you can get a sense of what I was trying to go for. All right. So again, I did not get anywhere near as much work done in this video as I wanted to, but I hope that just seeing me analyzing, breaking down a foreshortened leg, this foot is still feeling wonky. The more I look at it, it's like I draw them, I feel like I get it kind of where I want it to, and then after moving around to a different part of the figure, I come back and I'm like, oh, that still needs some refinement. But in order to really refine this the way that I think it needed to, I would probably have to redraw this whole thing on a large sheet of paper and really redo the whole thing from scratch. But we have, you know, we've gone through an hour here. You guys have hung out with me in my drawing process, and I really appreciate it. Again, there are bonus videos. I'm probably going to try and record a new, probably an hour-long video just exclusive to my Patreon subscribers. I'm going to try and get that out this week. So if you want to see that video, you can go to patreon.com/Jeremy and subscribe and get some bonus content. Again, if you'd like to read some of my comics, see the work that I've been producing over the years, go to comics.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to buy either a digital copy on Kindle or a physical copy of one of my books, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. So thanks for joining me. That's it for now. Go be